Yes.
I'm going to call this meeting to order. The work session, it's not a meeting, it's a work session for Thursday, May 8th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. The administration building.
Yes, sir. Ms. Cameron.
Yes, here.
Mrs. Paez.
Present.
Mrs. Crumley.
Present.
Mr. Roscoe. Present. Mr. Kroll present. All right, and we'd like to say happy birthday to Mrs. Cameron.
Happy birthday.
20,
Thank you.
22 years old. 22 years old.
21.
21.
I'll take that. What about 15? Sure. I think that would be obvious though, wouldn't it? Yeah, we'll keep with the 21.
All right.
Thank you.
To Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
All right. On to any changes to the agenda?
No.
Okay. On to approval of the agenda?
I'll second.
Mr. Crowe.
Mrs. Crumley.
Yes.
Mrs. Paez.
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron.
Yes.
Mr. Orozco. Yes. Mr. Kroll, yes.
And with that, on to presentations, and the first one is RBC Capital Markets. Yes.
Good evening, President, members of the board. I just want to confirm that you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you for your time tonight. I'm here to discuss some additional and updated election scenarios. In my presentation, I understand that we already went through a lot of this information, so I'll try to go through it pretty quickly so we can get to our discussion. Without further ado, I'll begin to share my screen here. All right, is everyone able to see my screen?
So what we're going to do is Joe is going to try to keep up, but we want you to continue leaving your screen on for the live stream, please.
Sounds like a plan. All right. So going to slide 1, this is the district's history of assessed valuation. Again, the district has seen steady growth in its AV year over year, with your 5-year average growth rate and your 10-year average growth rate sitting at around 2%. For financial planning purposes, though, we anticipate that your AV is only going to grow by 0.5% for the next 5 years and then 1% thereafter. We do have some updates about the veterans exemption. Skipping over to slide 3 here, we received some updated information about the level of disability of the veterans within Luna County. That's allowed us to calculate or project a more accurate understanding of how the disabled veteran impact will impact the district's assessed valuation. So our more recent projections is that this veterans exemption impact will impact the district's AV by $14.1 million or by about 2%. So again, for our future election planning and our tax rate setting, we do take these drops into your assessed valuation into account. We anticipate that the veterans exemption impact will begin next year, and then the disabled veterans impact will begin in 2027 or tax year 2026. Again, as we get information about this, we'll continue to update you about it too. The next slide, we have the district's history of tax rates. As a reminder, the district has maintained a $5.75 general obligation bond debt service tax rate historically, so that your overall total residential tax rate has been $8.25. Our current plan of finance is based off of keeping your tax rates at their current levels, and all of the election scenarios that we'll talk about tonight maintain your tax rates at their current levels too. The next slide, we have the district's current outstanding debt. The district is on a bond cycling program of issuing bonds every year and going out to voters every 4 years for geo authorization. You can see in the bar chart below, the district's debt is structured in a declining manner. This is what allows us to layer in future issuances without a tax rate increase. Your debt service payments are pretty level through 2028, though, so the district's plan of finance is a little tight, for the next few years. but that's something that we're aware of. And our goal is to try to roll over, excess cash year over year so that we can continue to maintain your tax rate at its current levels without needing a tax rate increase while still being able to go out to voters. Overall debt management plan. Again, the last time we went out to voters for GO bonds is back in 2021. We have sold all of that $5 million of authorization, which is why we're going back out to voters this upcoming November, potentially. The amount of that election or the timing of it really does depend on the needs of the district. The other thing on this slide too is that we talk a little bit about your tax rate management. Again, our goal is to keep your debt service tax rate at $5.75. That debt service tax rate, though, can be a blend of GO bond rate and also education technology note rate also. And then again, lastly on the slide, we have your legal bonding capacity. The district can legally bond up to $40 million. Since we have $22 million outstanding, the district could issue an additional $18 million. The reason why we're not looking at issuing an additional $18 million, though, is because of your tax rate capacity. So slide 7 is where we get into our election scenarios. So first looking at scenario 1, this looks at only going out for a GO bond election in 2025. So you would dedicate the full $5.75 debt service tax rate towards the GO bonds. That allows the district to go out to voters this upcoming November for $9.5 million. Scenario 2 looks at, okay, what if we try to target $400,000 of ETN issuances annually? It would require a 66-cent ETN tax rate to be able to collect $400,000 annually. With a 66 ETN tax rate in place, that would allow for a $5.09 GO bond tax rate. That $5.09 GO bond tax rate would allow the district to go out for $7 million this upcoming November, and then we'd go back out to voters in 2029 for $8.7 million into perpetuity. I'm going to skip around a little bit and go to the next slide on slide 8, just because I want to talk about the process of an overnight ETN before we talk about the next election scenario. So really what we would be doing is that, starting in August of 2026, we would go ahead and levy an education technology note tax rate. Now, I'm sure you're wondering why not this upcoming year? And the reason being is because your debt service payment for 2026 is similar to your debt service payment in 2025. And again, we've had to levy a $5.75 GO bond tax rate to be able to cover your outstanding debt payments. And we're anticipating that we're going to need another $5.75 GO bond tax rate for the upcoming year to be able to cover your 2026 GO bond debt service payments. Now, if we see that there is some overcollection, we may be able to start the education technology note this year, but we'll have to see how tax rate setting shakes out with PED this summer. But at the latest, we would set an education technology note in August of 2026 with PED. Once that tax rate is in place, beginning in tax year 2026, tax collections begin to accumulate in the district's education technology note debt service fund. We basically will issue the amount of ETNs depending on the amount of collections we get. Our target is $400,000, but if we collect $410,000, then we can issue a $410,000 education technology note. The amount of ETNs we issue depends on the amount of collections we collect throughout the year. In the summer, what we would do then is that we would issue an overnight loan with the state treasurer's office. And the reason for that is because the funds collected in your ETN debt service fund, they can only be used to pay off education technology notes. They cannot be used for your technology needs. ETN proceeds that you get from selling an ETN, those can be used for your technology needs. So what we would do is that we would basically sell a one-day ETN with the state treasurer's office. Because we already have the collections in the bank, we already have the repayment of this ETN in the bank, the day after it closes, we would pay off that ETN and it would be completely off the books. Doing so converts those ETN debt service funds into ETN proceeds that can legally be used for your technology needs. We also like this process too because it just reduces your interest costs since that ETN is only outstanding for, one day. Then once we would get to August of 2027, we would set the ETN tax rate again with PED, targeting a $400,000, issuance. Should we go with scenario two, we would do this process every year with the state treasurer's office. Going back to the slide before, scenario seven, or sorry, slide seven, scenario three looks at what if we skip the 2025 election and instead we go out to voters in 2027. Because we wait a couple years, that gives us some capacity. Your debt will continue to mature in 25 and 26, so that by the time we get to 2027, you do have more capacity. So that's why we have a $12 million, election in 2027, slightly higher than what we would be able to go out for in 2025. Now, the thing with this, though, is that it can be kind of tricky to manage a tax rate without having any GO bonds to issue. So you can see that, for the total debt service tax rates, tax rate for tax year 2024 has already been set at $5.75. Because your next year's debt service payment is about the same, we'll be able to justify another $5.75 tax rate. But, starting in tax year 26 or calendar year 27, we'll start to see that tax rate potentially go down to $5.62 and then even lower to $5.50 in tax year 27 or calendar year 28. Now, some of the tricks we have up our sleeve to avoid the district's tax rate from dropping would be that, for one, we can try to prepay your debt. And then the other option too is that we could levy a small education technology note to really fill in that gap so that your overall debt service tax rate would continue to be $5.75. I just want to emphasize that we really want to try to make sure that your tax rate continues to be $5.75, because even if it were to slightly drop down to, $5.62 or $5.55, if we go back out to voters in 2027, for a tax rate of $5.75, we would have to communicate to them that, it's a tax rate increase, even though $5.75 has been the historical average of your tax rate. So, all three of these scenarios we're more than happy to work with. It really just depends on the timing of your capital needs, and also depends on the amount of your education technology needs also. That really does conclude my presentation. I know I went through a lot of information pretty quickly, so I'm happy to go over any part again, and I'm also happy to go into further depth about any of the election scenarios if you have any questions.
When do we gotta decide these scenarios?
Yeah, so the deadline, we really would want the district to approve the resolution for the election by your July meeting. I want to technically say that the final date for an election resolution to be filed is in the mid of August. I think it's August 15th. But generally the sooner the better. But we still definitely have plenty of time. We can, approve at your June or your July meeting.
Knowing if we could, just if we're in a position that we're able to maybe push it out to 2027, just to allow us more wiggle room, and then see what happens with these taxes and the exemptions that are coming up, and see if yeah, she was talking about them. The exemptions,
Yeah.
It's-
If I may.
Yes.
Yeah, so again, we're well aware of the veterans exemption. Again, going back to slide 3, we've run an analysis and we believe that it'll force your HV to drop by about $14.1 million or by about 2%. So we're aware of this, and this analysis is included in our election projections. So, all of our election scenarios anticipate this dropping your AV2 so that we can avoid that tax rate increase. The other thing I'd like to mention too is that, although we may ask voters for geo authorization. We are not required to issue it, even though we have that authorization. So we can go out for an election this upcoming November for, $9.5 million or that $7 million. And who knows, maybe the veterans exemption comes in a bit more aggressive than we anticipated. If that happens, then we don't have to issue all of the authorization in order to avoid a tax rate increase.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Because I'm sure it said what it said so far, but I'm sure there's gonna be some movement with it, in the next year or two, and that could equal that or spell that out as far as like what it's actually gonna look like versus what they've told us on the front end.
Yeah. We've tried to use very conservative estimates. The Second Amendment that just raises the veterans exemption from 4,000 up to 10,000. That one's pretty straightforward. We anticipate that that'll impact our AV by a little bit over $4.3 million. But the disabled veteran is a little bit more tricky to project just because, we only have information about disabled veterans for Luna County and not specifically within the district's boundaries. We've tried to use very conservative estimates for that level of disability, though.
I mean, is there something glaring right now, district wise, that we need to need the money for? If we were to do this year?
Mr. President, members of the board. The reason that we were looking at specifically scenario 2 is for the one to keep the tax rate the same, right? The other is for the tech note of the $400,000. The main focus on that tech note would be to continue our one-to-one laptops that we have at the high school. Historically, we've been paying for that money out of Title I. But Title I money continues to reduce, and our the raises and everything continue to increase the need for Title I. So it's getting tighter and tighter to figure out how to fund that one-to-one laptop program that we have for the high school. And so what this $400,000 does is it gives us a long-term solution, basically, to continue the program at the high school and anything that's in addition to this, because right now that the one-to-ones is about $250,000 to $300,000, depending upon, with everything that's going on, that we're kind of looking at that rate. Anything that's addition to that, then we're going to be refreshing the computer labs that are throughout the district in other areas, and or refreshing other computer servers, et cetera, that we need. So that's kind of that, looking at that from a different perspective as far as the needs. And then the $7 million as far as the go bond, we would just look at the facilities master plan that has been approved and look at the needs for that. What was mentioned is we don't have to necessarily issue the bonds. We just need to go out for the election, and then we can adjust the issuance later on as we need it in the next 4 years, basically.
Which scenario is it that you are in?
Two.
So then which one is that one puts it,
That would be a 2025 go.
so we would redo it again this year, basically, is what you're saying.
So we would issue that in 2025, so it goes out to voters in November. Now, as I understand it, and RBC can correct me if I'm wrong, we would go out to the voters with the $7 million election, but that the tech bond, we can go out to it, we can mention it there, or we can just do it without going to the voters on.
Well,
Isn't that correct?
I don't want to have another issue where we don't it gets voted on, you know what I'm saying? If we can do it without using the voters, let's just do it.
I mean, the 7 million, you do have to do that, but the 400,000 each year you would not.
I think scenario 3 is just too risky with your tax rate going down and then expecting people to be okay with it going up.
And that's exactly the reason why we wanted to do something. And so the discussion was with the tech note so that we can continue that one-to-one program that we've been doing for several years at the high school.
Well, technology costs are going to just go up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's why I say go back to, the dust that hasn't settled yet with what they've done and this possible reduction. And But it's gonna take another year for the dust to settle, and then they're gonna make tweaks to it, and they're gonna be like, oh, well, we changed this, and we changed this, and now you gotta contend with this, and so, yeah, I think we need to be kind of just in the middle of the road and not be headed one way or the other.
Is there anything else that's pressing that we need, or we're good?
There are some issues, I'm sure you've been told about, Columbus, we just replaced the HVAC system over there because the geothermal is going down. RST's got the same thing that's going on, Baton's got the same thing. They're not quite there yet, but they're headed that direction. As I understand it, RST already has one of the 4 pumps down. If one more goes down, we're not gonna be able to operate in the heat. Because
Well,
of-
we had to close school one day because it's too cold.
Right.
Just for that.
So, your facilities master plan, I know that's part of it. There's some other things that is part of that facilities master plan that we could use the funds for. But being a 4-year election, you could spread some of that out to meet the needs that you need, but not necessarily overburden the everything else in case, like you say, something else happens that the veterans come in a little bit higher than expected, we could still work with that.
So if it were to go out to voters and it wasn't approved by the voters, what would that look like? How would that change the whole scenario?
Yeah, more than happy to answer that. So, if voters do not approve at this November election, we can go out for a special all mail-in ballot election in the spring. Technically state law does not allow us to bring the same question to voters, but, generally bond council's opinion is, if we ask for $9.5 million in November and that failed, we can ask for $9.4 million in the spring, and that's fine. It's still technically not the same question. Our other option then too is that we would just wait until the 2027 regular election, and in the interim, we could try to manage your tax rate, through levying whatever education technology note rate would be needed to keep your tax rate level, or by prepaying some of your debt.
It's likely to be approved, I would say,
I mean,
but
we
who
gotta
knows?
make sure we push it out there that it's for the kids and, that whole thing.
Well, then I think if it stays the same, I think that's a
Yeah.
good selling
Yeah.
point too. We're not trying to increase anything. I'm just trying to maintain what we have. I think
And maybe it needs to be worded that way, it's staying the same, it's just.
And usually whenever we have the flyers and we're advertising that, we do, that it is a maintenance of the rate, not an increase.
Now, does this include more than our students? Does it include our teachers and all in this?
You're saying about the improvements in technology?
Yeah,
Well, and technology can be spent on anything that the district needs technology
okay,
related.
so it can't be just teachers, or just,
Right.
okay.
So, our main focus, our main thought on this is for the one-to-one students. But given a 400,000 versus, like I said, it's normally about 250, 300 in that range. That gives us about $100,000 to do additional technology things that is needed either for students or for staff.
Thank you.
If I can add to that too, on slide 13 is the statute for education technology note use of proceeds.
Let's try to get it on
And
the following, I guess in June, huh? Get it over with. We have to do a walkthrough next week or on it, or do we, or whatever they call it, talk about it, or
The first read or
first read or whatever, do we need to do anything, or we just approve it, and we approve it next week?
I think this is just a board approval once we put the resolutions together.
Let's just approve it next
Yes.
week. Oh,
Is next week too soon, or should we do it next month?
Next week's fine.
just get it over with.
Because I think part of that too is the sooner we know what's gonna happen with it,
Yeah.
the more time we have to get the information out
It's probably better.
Yeah.
and get, if it's done in May, our staff is still in the building, all the staff is still there. we can start getting that information out as to what is trying to be done with these.
That would be a good ending for them to look forward to.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Should you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or any of my colleagues. Additionally, once you guys have decided on election amount, if you could let us know, that way we can kind of get the ball rolling with bond council. Next week is definitely doable for an approval, but to get you guys everything needed in time, we'd need to know by, either tomorrow or by Monday.
Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, for an approval next week, if that's what the board would like to do, we would just need to know which scenario you would like to go with by tomorrow or Monday to give bond council enough time to draft up the resolutions.
Oh, okay. We were all thinking, oh.
We're gonna, that is go forward.
Yeah.
That's back. The green one is
That's what they're-
a,
You guys know what needs to be happening. That's what the district wants. That's what we're gonna do. Yeah. Okay.
Good afternoon, President Roscoe, members of board,
we
superintendent.
need to do something over here.
I am here to present on our child development center and give you some information.
Thank you.
That we're looking at and moving on to the next school year. And Mrs. Reinhardt, Mrs. Nitz, Mr. Adcock, at any point in time you want to jump in, please jump in. Okay. So just kind of an overview of where we've been, and the struggles we've had. The original vision and expectations based on the information I was directed for and the grants that we received. The Child Development Center was supposed to be a Montessori dual language early child program from birth to 3 years old for staff. The first grant we received was specific to an organization who needed childcare for their staff. The second grant we received was a teacher retention program that was based on dual language and early childhood. And the vision was to go from birth to 3 years old. The grants were written in the fall of 2022, I believe. I was hired in April of 2023. I had from April, and originally the end date was June. We were supposed to be open in June of 2023. That didn't happen. They gave us several extensions. We ended up opening it up finally with ECECD's all their approvals through licensure in November. District financial support in the very beginning, it was the understanding that the district would be able to support the center if the funding didn't completely reach what we needed. So if there was any gaps at that point in time, it was the understanding that district would be able to support it somewhat. My job duties, I came in as a child care lead. They switched me over to assistant director of extended learning services. I received the center with the expectation that that would be a minimal part of my job once it opened. I was only supposed to run the budget. I'm also in charge of the community schools, after school programs, summer camps, high dosage tutoring. Trying to think of everything on my list, and I just picked up attendance, so I'll be taking over attendance for next year. Challenges, once we got the ball rolling, we discovered that the district could not financially support us because it was not a K-12 program, and because it was early childhood, the district was not allowed to put any kind of financial support into the center. Staffing, because we started hiring in September, and with the very specific Montessori dual language early childhood program ideas, it was very difficult to hire staff. My first round of staffing, I had 2 applicants for my teachers. So that has been a difficulty. And of course, the ECECD requirements have been very difficult. And I'm gonna go into a little bit more on the requirements. They were not at the forefront at the very beginning because we didn't realize we were gonna go into what's called focus, which provides us our additional funding. The very beginning, the idea was that we were just gonna have teachers self-pay and they were gonna be charged $640 a month.
What year did you say that it opened?
November of 2022. 23. Yes, I wanna say 23. I think the grants were written in 22, and I came in April of 23, and then in November we finally opened. And then again, going back to my job duties, I'm spending a lot of time at the center. I have to fill in. Subs have been very difficult. Our teachers work 8 hours days, and subs do not want to work 8 hour days. They want to go home at 3:30. We open from 7:30. We close at 5. So we've had a difficult time with subs. So I've had to fill in a lot for my teachers.
You talk about the district financial support. From my understanding, it's a component of PED, correct?
It
Because
is,
it's not
it is.
K-12, so PED won't fund that, right?
PED won't allow us to use any kind of funding, operational or otherwise, because we are, our district's a K-12 district.
It's not meant to serve.
It's not meant to serve early childhood. So yes, that's correct. It was a PED thing, not necessarily a district thing.
Now, with that though, we do have in a pre-K program that we do here, but that is a separate funding source
Mhm.
from the state of New Mexico, and that is for 3 and 4-year-olds.
Okay.
Okay, so who will serve as of June? So we have some kiddos who are aging out. We can't take anybody after 3 years old, after they turn 3 because of licensure. We don't have enough space. We can only have 2 classrooms, and 3-year-olds cannot be housed with anybody under 3. So we had to drop it to just 6 weeks up through 2. So we will have 9 infants and 4 toddlers. Our center can hold 11 infants and 5 toddlers, toddlers being 2-year-olds. But we have 2 infant spots that will be open and 1 toddler spot that is open. Staffing, we have, as of June, because we are losing some teachers, we only have 3 teachers that have their children at our center and 10 support staff. Support staff's looking like EAs, nurse assistants, community school
And this staff
coordinators.
is the staff that use the center, not the staff that work at the center.
Yes, sorry, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we've
It's
got,
so confusing when it's all staff.
yeah, we've got 2 different children.
Right? Yes, so this is who our parents are. of
The
kids.
parents.
Yes,
So one of the things I have is, the parents who are low income,
okay.
and they could receive a stipend from CYFD.
So that is what we ended up doing.
Yes.
So when you do the numbers, 640, 16 kids, it was not going to cover salaries. So then I started looking into other funding sources. I started jumping on the early childhood Zooms they have every month. And I learned about Focus and the child care assistance. The child care assistance pays far more than what we're charging our teachers. For example, right now we're at a 2+ star, and for an infant we get $1,050, but we're only charging our teachers $640. And then a toddler drops down to like $865. So the more stars you get, the more money that the state will give you. But that's only if our staff qualifies. So as you see, we're starting to drop down because our teachers can't afford to pay $640 a month. So now it's becoming more of support staff because they're able to get the child care assistance. And that is really what's floating the center, is the government assistance. So 188 staff, so we have 10 staff members who have 188-day contracts, and we have 3 staff that are 240s, and then 2 self-pay and 11 childcare assistants. Now, for the funding to work, we have to keep the center open for 12 months. We need to be getting that income all year round. We did talk about dropping to the 188, but that drops us down to 10 months, and we're losing 2 months of income. So they pay regardless if they come, just like every other childcare center. So that helps us to maintain some of that funding for our salaries. Any questions on?
Well, and it helps if, parents have a certain place all year long, rather
It
than
does.
having to get 2 months now to figure out what they're gonna do with my kids.
And we have a lot of teachers, and support staff who do run summer programs. So they do, or they go to training, so they do have a place for their child during the summer if they need it. We do drop in numbers during breaks. We typically have about 6 kids during breaks as opposed to the whole, like, well, right now we have 15. But we're still getting,
Continues regardless.
yes, so they're in their contract, it says regardless of holidays or vacations or breaks or wind days, that they still have to pay. And then our self-pay staff, theirs is payroll deducted, so it comes right out of their paycheck. So either we get it straight from the state or we get it straight from their paycheck.
So projections for next year?
That's where I'm going.
Sorry.
All of it is dependent on how many stars we have right now. So once I make 2+ stars and January of 2024, I got to apply for a focus training. So focus starts in the fall of every year. So I started in October cohort. There are several requirements in moving up in stars. So I've had to do last October started Zooms. So I've been doing Zooms on Saturdays and Wednesday nights. I think the issue is they used to be during the day, but a lot of childcare centers work at their childcare center, so they can't step away from the kids to do the Zooms. So I've been doing these Zooms, 2-hour Zooms in the beginning it was every 2 weeks, now it's monthly, so that I can get to a point where I can verify and apply for higher stars. So to get to 4 stars, we're at 2+, we're gonna have to skip 3 and go straight to 4, so that we have the funding to be able to provide for our salaries. And this is kind of where we're at. I've got 3 more months of these Zooms. My last Zoom is June 28th. So as soon as that Zoom is over, I can apply for a coach and then apply to verify to get moved up in stars. Online trainings, I still have about 17 more hours of online trainings that I have to complete. Teacher requirements, the teachers have to have 6 credit hours of childhood courses. I have one that's met that already and one who is currently in classes trying to get those credit hours. Online, they also have 24 hours of annual training they have to do, plus 1, 2, 3, those 4 trainings they have. Our EAs also have to have the same trainings. And then the structural requirements in order to move forward is this is kind of one of my big concerns is that we have to do 3 parent conferences within a year, and each one of these parent conferences has to have 4 sets of observations, 4 months apart. So I don't know if they will qualify us, even though we've done it, it hasn't been 4 months apart. So that's kind of unnerving for me. So I'm hoping to work with a coach and she'll help us through this. Okay.
Going back to that last slide, the training that's required there, how does that compare to a teacher, a director, an EA at a school site? Is that pretty similar?
I have never done this much training in my life. And it's not exactly the best training. It's sitting on a computer clicking, you know, it's a lot.
And the reason I ask that is the squeeze worth the juice?
Right.
Well,
Is what I'm trying to get at.
This is a lot.
Our pre-K teachers
Yeah.
have to get in associates, so that's the only other group that are kind of required to do additional
A
training.
pre-K
Like a-
assistant.
A kinder EA, if they're hired, they take their paraeducator test, they're done with training other than what we as a district required.
And the pre-K teachers have trainings, they don't have kids on Friday afternoons, so
Right.
they do a lot of.
That's
time.
why that's
important to have that time for the trainings they have to get done.
So our dilemma becomes that we can't close the center for them to do those trainings because of the fact that those are staff kids who need to be at work, and that's why we're open so that their parents can work. So we can't close down to allow them to do these trainings. We don't have the funding to bring them in on a Saturday and do these trainings. So that becomes trying to kind of juggle the amount of time. Okay, you do an hour here, and I do have one EA that is a floater, so she floats between the classrooms whenever we need it. She covers lunches, she covers the teachers' prep times. And so they kind of alternate out in these like 1 hour increments, and that's if everything goes according to plan and nobody's out
And
and
it
everything goes.
was stressful, like parent-teacher conference days with the district.
Yes,
That was hard.
That was
The
hard.
first parent-teacher conference day, we tried to let all the staff, we kept the center for all the staff so they could follow their school schedule. The second time, we're like, here's the hours, you'll have to find,
if I did.
because we can't afford it, it's too.
So you were going to 6 o'clock to 6
Yes.
o'clock or whatever.
Yeah.
With that,
Yes,
with every school is open at a different time, so it's not like on Mondays and Tuesdays I could stay late. It was all
A
week.
week.
So I was trying to figure out, okay, can I pay overtime? Okay, they work too many hours. What days am I gonna come in early so that I could get them to?
Andy covered a lot. It was just hard.
It was hard. It was hard.
So
Our
like with
teachers
the,
appreciated it, but it was hard.
so like with the EAs, let's say an EA for the childcare center versus an EA at an elementary school, is the pay the same?
Yes, so we are paying our EAs $15 an hour, but they are required to have a CPR certified, they have to have their food handlers card, they have to do a health and safety training, they have to have 2 different background checks.
Plus all
And
this.
what I-
Plus all this.
Plus all that.
Plus all that.
And what I'm getting at is that is it a situation that be like, I don't need that headache, I can go make the same
doing something like.
That's-
Oh,
that's
that's
a
less hours and less hours a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
8 hours for 7.5, which
It's a
would cut
challenge.
down in their salary though. So the additional hours do help them make more. And they're open 240, so they are getting more money. But it's a lot, it's a lot.
Is the pay comparable to what they're making with the Head Start? Because the Head Start people have to do the
I
same thing.
stole one of the Head Start teachers.
Because
My
they-
infant teacher, I stole her from Help New Mexico.
because
And
how-
she's making $100 less with us than she was with Help New Mexico. And a lot of that has to do with benefits, because they don't provide benefits. So even though her hourly rate was higher, due to all the benefits, she's making $100 less than what she was making over there.
Does this 4-star requirement process, is that something that stays with the center
We get annual.
forever? Or
We get
or
annual-
is it
annual-
associated with you?
No, the center. Okay, yeah, it's not associated, it's with the center.
But it's an
So
annual checkup basically every
Yes,
year, and you
we
can fall
get-
below that if
We
certain
get
requirements are met.
licensure is in the building all the time. We just barely actually just got inspected and we passed. So that was great. And I was surprised because usually they come in and there's things to work on and she's like, they said, nope, you did great. So that was good. But that was just like a health and safety check. So they do health and safety checks and then they also come in and do like focus as far as instruction and stuff.
So in order to be able to be solvent and make money, you need to have more people.
To break even, and
Well,
to make money.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so the time
It's.
we have to have more staff to have more people.
Yeah.
We can't have more kids without more space.
And you need a bigger building.
And we need a bigger building. I was quoted about, what, last year, 2 years ago, I was quoted $500,000 to add another classroom and another bathroom. And that would be the only way we could grow, because we're kind of,
Right.
we're
So
at.
you're kind of back where you're at in order to.
Now,
That's
we're a
what
5-star. When you get to 5-star, there's more money. But we're not thinking 5-star yet.
So that's why Head Starts are able to be solvent, because they have lots of students.
And they have a lot less, we are juggling ECD focus and head and district. So when you're talking about other centers, they don't have to do the benefits we have to do. So then they don't have as much overhead. Yes, and they have a lot of federal grants as well that
Yes.
they can get through Health New Mexico and Head Start.
Yes, and are there enough, spaces with Help New Mexico?
They have much bigger classrooms and they also have 2 teachers in every classroom. So they don't have any EAs. They have 2 teachers that divvy up all this workload.
Right.
So it's not as hard on
But
the
they don't,
teachers.
because historically they've had a huge waiting list.
And they do.
They still have.
They
to-
do, and that's specifically because of the requirement for low income. Yes. Okay, so where you're
Just kind of
at.
back to the benefits, there's one slide that we present to directors and principals and such about, whenever you want to pay a stipend for some extra duty that a teacher is doing, they have to add 28% in benefits to that stipend. And that does not include any health insurance or any of the insurances. That's strictly ERB, FICA, Medicare, all of those things that are required, retiree healthcare, et cetera. So back to their point, if they're getting better benefits,
Mhm.
but it ends up less money.
So where are we at? So we're currently a 2+ star. I made 2 stars and then because I joined Focus Training, they gave us a plus. So we're funded as a 3-star. But technically, we have to verify as a 3-star. And so that looks like is in July, once I get my focus coach, I get to apply to verify, which takes them 45 days, up to 45 days to come visit the center and to inspect it. After that, they have 90 days to make up a decision on whether we get it or not. So let's say we skip 3 stars and we go straight to 4. If I verify for 4 and I don't make it, I'm stuck at 2 stars. They don't say, oh, but you made 3.
Yeah.
They don't. So they drop you all the way down to where you were originally. So it's kind of like, okay, we can go for 3 stars. I'm confident we'll make 3 stars, but then you're looking at the time and the funding that comes with it. So, and I'll show you a breakdown of what we need to happen. My training, I think I told you guys all of that already, and I talked about the staffing. Okay, so this is my projection. Now, if this is like best case scenario, no kids drop out, we're fully enrolled, and we make 4 stars by November, I'm projecting 207,300 for the year. That's the current approximately, for our current rating at 2+ stars, we get about 15,000 a month. if we have all our kids enrolled and no one drops out. Once we move to 4-star, we'll get approximately 18,900. And just kind of comparison, annually at 3-star with our 16 kids, I keep my self-pay at 4, no more than 4, because I need the funding. And then it's the 11 toddler infants, because we pay more for infants, and then the 5 toddlers. 4 stars, a full year of 4 stars will make us 226,800, and once we get to 5-star, it'll be 282,300. I do get the grads grant, where they gave us $5,000 for supplies and materials. And this year they gave us $5,000 for intern compensation. We do have a father from the high school who comes to the center for about an hour a day, and he helps out with the kids. He cleans, anything we need him to do. Any questions on revenue?
I mean, just the overall jump. If you go back one slide, from the 3 stars to the 5 stars is, I mean, it's,
It's a big jump.
yeah.
It is a big jump. What they
That's
like
if
to
we-
see is that
That's
year
if
at your
we
star.
make all this happen.
Yes. And a lot of it has to do with my staffing too. Are they able to complete the trainings? Are they? able to
They are
do
gonna
the
stay.
courses? Are they gonna stay? Because turnover is an issue, yes. Definitely. Okay, so this is what I'm projecting for our budget. We will have about 30,000 in carryover if I'm doing this correctly, Bill.
You got about 30,000 right now.
So
Like we do till the end of the year, we'll see.
I'm still bringing money in. I bring money in.
Hey, what happened to the check we're gonna get from, what's his name? The senator, did he write us a check yet or no?
I haven't heard anything about that.
gets distributed through the state and it's not.
Oh.
What was
Just
that?
asking, just asking.
So I'm hoping to have about 249 for this year. And that's if everything goes according to plan. I had to really be creative the last 2 years because I knew right away the funding was gonna be an issue. So I ended up convincing one of my grants to extend a year because both of the grants were supposed to only be a 1-year grant and that was it. So the second grant, I convinced them to extend it a year and I saved all that funding. And that was how we ended up with enough to make it through this year.
Thank you for doing that.
I
wish
wish
I
they
would have known that you did that, because I didn't know that you did any of
So
that, so.
she's amazing.
We did all everything.
She is amazing.
I think
And it worked.
we were asking for this information for the longest time and we weren't getting it, so thank you.
I'm sorry you didn't get it, but I appreciate your help.
I'm not blaming you, I'm just saying that
We really didn't.
we didn't know any of this, so thank you.
Okay, so this is where currently their salaries are at. I have 3 EAs and 2 teachers. And we're currently at 230, that's with their 4% increase. So that is their current, we are not gonna be able to float this next year, obviously. So we have some options to discuss, none of which are any order of preference or anything like that. It's just from highest to lowest, I guess. So the first option is it stays under learning services. I remain the director. There we go.
One more.
There you go. Okay. The staff moved to a 230 contract and we flipped them. So 230 is some of them work summer and some of them will work holidays. That way the center stays open and even though those days are going to be lower kids anyway, we'll still have the ratios. But we're still able to keep it open all year. So we maintain that funding coming through. But one of the EAs will have to switch to a 6-hour. I need that 58 because without them, we can't cover lunches and we can't cover prep times. And prep times are required by the state. They have to have 2 hours in order to meet licensure. The challenge of that is me. I'm paid out of operational, amongst some other grants, but a big portion of operational, which technically the district can't fund me to do. So that is one challenge. Time to complete the required training is another challenge.
So that's option 1.
That's a option. A option.
Stand by for me.
Option A. Sorry.
And that's what that looks like without my salary in it. That's just the staffing. So that drops to about 208. And that's maintaining the 4% at the 230
And we're
days.
still,
And we're still over the 207, but yes.
But the 207 was based on a
Perfect world.
Perfect world.
A perfect.
And
yes,
it-
with all seats filled.
So it's a blended. It's 5 months of one and
Yes,
4 months,
Plus,
3 months of the other.
assuming you're gonna get the 4 stars and
Yes.
assuming nobody leaves.
That's
and all the
exactly.
training is done.
Exactly.
Yes.
Perfect world.
Perfect world.
Which we don't live in a
I try really hard though.
You have tried really hard for
So option B, is a little bit more pricey, but it kind of takes away some of that liability of the district. Is transitioning my infant guide into we call them guides because that's a Montessori term. And we had issues with teachers thinking that it was open to teachers and there's a huge salary difference in those. Making her the supervisor and the infant teacher. So she would be doing both roles. She's working on her associates. She'll have her associates in December. So she has all the educational requirements needed to be the director. She's already done all of the trainings that I'm supposed to be getting done. She's already certified to do classroom observations, using ears. And she's in the infant classroom and there's only 6 students in the infant classroom as opposed to the 10 in the toddler. So it's a little bit easier for her to walk away with her, as long as her EA is in it, of course.
That's a good question.
Yes.
When you said that option B, helps with the exposure liability of the district, is that because we are not supposed to be paying you?
So is that audit findings of,
Okay.
they're not really supposed to be,
So basically,
But
you're
you're going
moving
into
away
it.
from it and doing something else and having this person be in charge.
yes, I would
That's the
still
best
run
way-
like the
yeah.
budget part of it and probably the HR budget.
Like the overseer, that's
But
basically.
all of the instructional part, like all of the trainings and the compliance parts of what has to happen for licensure would now be on her.
So it's because you're paid out of operations.
Yes.
But unexpectedly, your job duties now are including a lot of this.
Yes.
A lot.
What percent of your time is spent there?
Yeah, what?
I'm there every morning for 2 hours. That's what I do at the center. And that's just a check-in, make sure everything's good, go through things with my staff. It is very noisy in there. I don't know if any of you been in
I've
that
never been there.
building. It's a tiny office. And you have a lot of kids screaming. So I have an office at Florida Branch and that's where I go to do all of my office work. So I'm also doing ethics, which is all of the funding for it. I'm working on the trainings. I'm dealing with any kind of student issues, any kind of staff issues.
You're running it.
I'm running it.
You're
I'm
running the
running it.
center.
I'm running the center.
She handles all staff issues.
And so that
And she
workaround,
covers for subs.
That I cover
that
for
workaround with paying you out of operations so that it's not out of the line items for this exposes the district to problems.
How come we weren't told?
Because they don't want us to know that.
How come we weren't told about that there's?
I can't answer that.
But yeah, they can't answer.
I'm sorry,
No, and I understand that, but
you know,
anyways,
you probably should have been.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
thank you for being aware.
Thank you for being honest.
The main goal was for me not to. I was supposed to just set it up and then I wouldn't
And it's
have
not
to.
happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
And please don't take the questions, please don't take them the wrong way. We're just
Oh,
trying
no,
to
yeah.
understand as far as like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's nothing against you. It's
At all.
just trying to figure all this and wrap our head around some of the stuff because
We didn't know this.
So in this scenario here, the person who is going to be running it, do you feel like they're educationally able to do all of
Educationally, yes, she
to
is
do all of
young.
the
I'll
stuff
admit
that
she
you do?
is young, but
Yeah.
she's been teaching me. She was from,
when she was at-
yeah, she was, and
yeah,
she, I
good.
So-
can't remember what center she was at.
So
but she was
besides
there
the
in
building, we
acting.
would have no, and paying them and doing all that other stuff. We wouldn't have no responsibility. They would handle their own little
No, you
thing.
still have
No,
responsibility.
I mean, we'd be
Yeah.
in charge, but obviously, you know.
I just wouldn't do the instruction part of it. So all
She's
the
just being
compliance and my
replaced.
name wouldn't be on the director part of it at the state level, honestly. Because right now I'm the director of the center on the licensing through
She's
ECC.
So it would be her.
It would be her.
is there an option C?
There is an option,
Okay.
there is an option, but
But I got a question with option D, so we can get down to the nitty gritty. Can we afford it?
that's where I'm going at. Money. So is this more pricey? Because I would have to give her a bump in pay
That's under a perfect world.
because of the fact that she would be taking on a whole lot more duties than she is right now. So I would bump her up one up, so she'd be making 22 instead of the 21. That would drop that EA part-time to 6 hours instead of 8. But we're still looking at 216,000.
That's just salary and benefits.
That's the salary benefits, and then we're really
No supplies,
hardly on
or-
grads for their supplies and materials.
Have you projected out what it would look like overall? What would we be in the hole every year?
With
You know-
everything?
About how
He's all
far, how
yes.
far,
Yeah.
How far in the hole?
how far in the hole?
Well, I mean, in a perfect scenario, you were at, with 4 stars, you were at what, 200 and,
That was the London one. So,
so
4 stars.
4 stars, we would be at 226,000.
Okay, so we would.
That's,
Perfect world.
So-
would be
perfect.
now, exactly, perfect world. Now, each one of these scenarios is north of $200,000. And that's if nothing
Just
changes
salary.
in a perfect world,
And nothing
salaries
breaks.
only. That's not any type of supplies, anything like that. We'd be applying on grants for those supplies.
Mhm.
And so if 4 stars don't happen, if
We're done.
somebody drops out, if a staff member leaves and we can't fill that right away, we lose students. All of those variables come into play whenever we start looking at all of that.
What the ballpark is?
Yeah, what's the?
Give me an
Yeah.
idea. What's an idea?
What are the other expenses ballpark?
Oh, well,
So for meals, we don't do anything with meals because our parents have to bring their own meals. So we're looking at just basically wear and tear stuff, cleaning supplies, do we supplies, how expensive
Lights.
cleaning
I
supplies
know
are.
they're expensive.
I'm paying about $500 a month on cleaning supplies because they have to be constantly sanitizing. But we have stocked up pretty well as far as instructional materials and toys and those kind of things. I wanted to get what I could with the grants and we bought a beautiful storage in the back and we have everything stored back there. Knowing that eventually the funding wouldn't be there.
I think the scariest part is making sure we get that 4 stars, which that's the biggest
That's
the big
scandal.
one.
It's just,
That's the biggest scandal, because if we
Yeah.
don't get that 4 stars, we're in,
it's
I
like,
don't know what we'll do.
I don't know what.
Well,
it's almost like playing the stock market, like, well, hopefully we'll.
can I?
And it's nothing
It's
against
not good
anybody,
odds.
it's just like, well, hopefully.
We're not gonna do A,
Okay.
but all I wanna do is what about B?
What's?
All I need to know is how much money are we in the hole with?
Ballpark.
That's you, buddy. How much are we on? How much are we in the hole with? Realistically, it doesn't have to be perfect what you
Right
think.
now, we're at 30,000 on the account, so we're not in the hole.
And
So if you're talking year over year with salaries and some supplies where you're talking about $500 a month, which I think is low,
Slow.
you're probably breaking even at a perfect scenario, at a perfect world.
Perfect
So in the
world.
real world, we're
In the real world, every student that you lose is now a loss.
Can I ask something about the meals? There is a reimbursement program for meals.
There is, but we don't have a kitchen. And in order for us, so we have a refrigerator
Just one thing.
and we have a microwave, but we don't have an actual kitchen or the ability to cook any of that. So originally the plan was to just tie into the district and nutrition was gonna provide all our meals. But then nutrition found out that they weren't licensed to serve anybody under 3, so that couldn't happen. So then we looked to Help New Mexico, and they wanted a lot of money per kid. They wanted between I think it was $8 for breakfast and $10 for lunch per child.
Oh, she's gonna give us.
So we just.
Let's see option C.
Yeah.
Option C is just continue the center. So
But
what
we would
happened?
finish the
We
year.
would finish the year.
Yes.
What would happen with
The kids.
The kids.
kids and everything?
So staff members, we'd have 5 staff members to place within the district somewhere. All items purchased from grads, and we've spent about 30,000 from grads because they gave us a $20,000 startup grant last year. Anything purchased with grads has to go back to grads.
No,
To the high school.
It wouldn't go to the high school.
It would go back to
This is-
Socorro.
This is childcare.
Oh.
It would go to their district office in Socorro.
There's
They
a,
wouldn't even let you take it to the grads at the high.
No. And I wanna say, Joe, didn't you say that happened once before?
that was a separate.
I thought that too.
Right, there was a separate program, there is a separate program for the high school. And as I understand it, sometime in the past, that did this, the grads program at the high school did discontinue. All of those supplies were sent back to Socorro. The grads program did come back to the high school and they got their stuff back because it's still part of the program.
Like, what do they do?
They make it
with
so
that stuff? Just store
complicated.
it?
It's
I
different.
mean, you gave it to us, just let us have it, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the last thing would be with
Yeah.
supporting our families and buying childcare. So I would reach out to the other centers within the district and see if I could help
Help them.
place their kids in other centers.
And there was talk,
Because there's not a lot of slots.
the only thing I'm gonna ask, I like C a lot. And this is the only issue, we have obviously some amazing staff that you currently have right now.
That is my biggest.
I would make sure that we have openings here, we gotta
Yeah.
make sure we place them somewhere. I mean, I think that's only right.
That's not easy, Dan.
No, I'm not saying it is, that's not what I
To
said, I
find a
said,
place, yeah. to find a
let's
place
try
for
to
the
see if
kids.
we can find something
Oh,
for
for the
them.
kids.
He's
Yeah.
talking about staff.
Oh, that.
He's talking about staff.
Yeah, the kids, I'm not talking about them right now.
What is the district's recommendation?
See,
What have we
That's all I needed
spent
to know.
in this whole thing? What have we spent overall with, from
But we have.
construction to where we're at now? What have we spent on
So
that?
here's some information that Leslie had provided in the past.
Well, with all the grants and everything, obviously the grants offset everything. What are we in, the real question is, what are we in the hole?
That's what it's gonna be right now.
Right.
Right, we're not in the
no,
hole.
no, we're not in the hole.
Okay, you made it where,
Yes.
She was very frugal,
Very frugal.
she did amazing things.
thank you.
Thank you.
You know, to be honest, it's not fair to you to have to work on Saturdays. to be able to-
Or you do that extra stuff that you have to do to keep
We
this
had
thing
no
going.
idea.
I wish
I
we would have known
appreciate that,
this.
but I wanted it to succeed too.
Yes, yeah,
We see
I
that,
understand.
we see that too, it's.
But you got kids and you got family and.
So this is some information that is a little bit dated, it's
This
not
we
up to
did
date.
get.
But it was done in 2025, Leslie did this, sometime back. I believe you were
We
provided
did
with this
get this,
information.
yeah, we
Yeah.
got this. This is
So-
all we got.
I mean, just between the two grants, the early childhood grant and the Kellogg grant, you're looking at, $600,000. Yes, it is.
What kind of construction costs have we spent?
That was like $250,000.
250 for construction.
And that was just the beginning when they.
Which
Give it a facelift, I guess.
That was grant funds though. that
Yes.
Specific. to
Everything
Yeah.
that's been
It
done
was all
has been
grant
grant funding.
It's not been district.
There's been no district fund used besides me and maintenance.
Is it grant funding that could have been used for something else?
This grant funding was very
No,
specific
it's
to our
specific.
childcare center.
That was the Kellogg and.
Yes.
And
Both of those
But
are
the
specific.
capital outlay line.
the capital outlay line was for other stuff, I mean, that could have been
It
used
could have
for
been,
other-
right?
yeah.
Okay.
It was for the structure of the building.
I knew the yellow was specific to this.
Right.
But the
But
building,
the-
the building can be converted to something.
Yeah.
else.
Yes.
We can still use the building for other things if option C is
What
determined.
would we use?
I have an idea.
Alternative school.
Well-
Yeah, I'd like to hear it, yeah.
We were proposing maybe we could use it for the online school and also for a secure school for when students are struggling in the regular
used to.
brick setting where they could go, so
Yes.
we can still provide their services. And they would be in an alternate location to keep their education.
It was.
Because now we try to keep kids in school and provide what they need. That would be my thought. So the building, I don't think would waste.
Something like, yeah.
But Terry, I don't know how you felt. I know Terry and I talked about that.
What do you
What do
think
you think, Terry?
about all this?
About all of this, I know it's a lot on Andy. I know that it's, in my opinion, it's not sustainable at the rate we're going, and like every year we would be like, okay, are we gonna get the 4? And do we have the staff and so on? We, just like Melanie just mentioned, we could repurpose the building for students that are struggling or disciplined, that alternative placement for some students and.
I mean, I think just that 40,000 foot view and we're trying to service 3,000 plus kids. It goes back to that, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. We're not, but the money that we're being spent to benefit 9 kids up to 15 kids.
And I think
That's what I'm
it's, I'm a little disappointed, I guess, that I was under the impression that the center was meant to serve staff and students. Cause that's what I was
Later,
told.
when I found out about the grass grant, cause I.
That's what I was
looking for money.
told, was the
I needed
purpose from
money.
the beginning.
Yes.
That's what I was told.
No, the The first grant that was written was specifically for an organization looking for childcare for staff.
Okay.
It was during COVID and,
Yeah.
you know, everybody was struggling because no one could watch their kids. So ECCD put out this grant. So that was the first grant. And one of the requirements of that grant was you had to have another grant to supplement that funding. So then she reached out to Kellogg Grant and they said, okay, we'll do this. We want to do it was special for us because we're outside their area, but it was specifically for teacher retention. What can we do to bring teachers in and keep them here? With the added part of it being dual language.
Oh, okay.
But then the funding didn't allow for it to be full of usual teachers' kids because they weren't qualifying for that
Oh, that's
assistance.
Because
So that
it's 640.
So that would put us in a little bit of a pickle.
So when do we
When do
vote
we
on
need to
this?
decide?
I don't know if it's necessarily a vote, I think it's just a
I don't know if
discussion,
you
Terry.
necessarily-
Well,
Well, it has to be voted on.
I
or
think,
no?
I think you can
No?
put it on the next week's agenda.
Do we have to
if-
vote
if
or
you
that's
want
the
it.
call?
Do we have, is that your call?
Charles.
I don't think.
Yeah, I don't-
option,
Well,
It's
let's,
a program, so I don't know if you.
let's just
It's
go.
not a school, it doesn't have its own number or anything.
No,
It's
no,
separate
I
from
think
that.
The board just needs to be careful in how the recommendation is shared to the superintendent, where it's still ultimately the executive's decision and not a decision.
Well, we can express ourselves too. So I'm expressing myself that I think, expressing myself, I did mention that C is probably the best option with the idea that the people are helped, the kids, to get replaced. I know it's gonna be difficult, like Mrs. Perez says, but that also that the staff gets put in the right position and given an opportunity.
And there is some discussion, from my understanding, the county ended up with some money to open a daycare center.
Yes,
I heard that somewhere.
I believe it was $2 million last
Wow.
legislative.
Yeah, so I don't, we can reach out to them too and find out like, hey,
Maybe
you
that's
know,
another resource.
yeah, you know,
But it'll probably take some time to get set up and all that.
I would venture to guess, yeah, but we can check as to a status on it.
2 years.
It would be nice if they wrote us a check for $2 million.
I just, suggest we do something sooner rather than later, because the more time we have to make those changes, or the staff that are there have time to find other
Yeah.
resources, the better off it would be.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's nothing against anybody, it's just, I mean, just looking at things and it's not sustainable, you know? That's my take on it, and just playing that game that, you know, if we get to this point, if we get to that point, and it's a lot of uncertainty, you know, in a government, entity is not comfortable for, you know.
Well, and Sydney Public Schools' focus should be on pre-K through 12.
And that's what we're.
Yeah,
we're-
well,
And
and
that's
exposing
the,
the district's liability, I
Right.
don't want that either.
that is the focus of what we should be doing.
Mhm.
And if we're spending time and effort on this, because we didn't even talk about any type of indirect cost. You know, we run payroll for these people. We keep track of all of that. HR has to do their piece of it.
Maintenance.
Maintenance has to maintain the building, all of those types of things that was not anywhere in this presentation. And you can't really monetize it anyway, because you can't, that's the definition of indirect cost.
What do you think, Olivia? Because this is your, up your alley.
Yeah, no, the only way that you can maintain, when we were presented it, the goals, all the details about what obstacles were coming up, we didn't know about. So there were, of course, there's gonna be, it's a very difficult thing to run a daycare
And honestly,
center.
we
The
didn't
only
know
way
the
you can
obstacles
make-
either until we really started digging and
The only way
figured
you
it
can
out.
make it work is by having a large daycare center with a lot of kids, so that you can maintain what it costs to run it. And so in a small situation, it's really even hard for a home care provider to be able to afford to continue with her home care thing, because there's so many different costs. Yeah, so, no, I agree, I think, the thing that worries me, Daniel, is just finding daycare for the kids. that are
No,
gonna be
and I
out.
understand that.
And there's gonna be 9, 10
But-
parents, or 15 parents that are stressed about how they're gonna get daycare. So
But
that's
you're gonna
what
be
I
able to
worry.
start it earlier now than later, you know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
so that they can, you know.
It just
Yeah.
seems like it's inevitably going to happen,
Yeah.
so it's unfortunate
So
for
hopefully,
sure, but.
yeah, hopefully like talking to the head start early, seeing if they can, I know Gloria's not there anymore, but whoever's in charge.
I'll reach out to them.
Yeah,
See
reach
once
out to them
there's a
and see if
final
they can
decision
get-
made and I've notified staff, then.
And see if they can help with some spots for those kids. I know they have preferences and they have like formulas and maybe the kids not having a place to
Well, the
go.
majority of our kids will there's 10 of them who get childcare assistance, so that will be easy because they'll be able to slide right in. It'll be our kiddos who don't
I see.
qualify,
Yeah.
that will be harder.
Yeah, because they have
Which is
priorities.
right now it's two.
Kids who are migrant, kids who are homeless, I mean, there's
Mhm.
different priorities.
Mhm.
And then there's a lot of kids who have been on the waiting list,
Mhm.
have to come first before the kids are not on the waiting list, so
If Superintendent Nips decides to do part C,
that's
Um,
up to her.
how soon will this take an effect?
We go through June
So
30th.
their contracts are till June
Okay.
30th.
And we still have, even if we do end up losing a kid, whatever, and you said that we still have the $30,000 that was kind of coming into this year.
To cover.
Remember, we started out, according to the slide there, of $68,000.
Yeah.
So we've already cut that in half and then some, so we can make it, till June 30 and that way there's plenty of time to try and help.
And thank you guys for the work. I
Thank you.
mean, it wasn't, and I know a lot of stuff was kind of learning on the fly. And
Yes, it
learning
was.
was like, oh yeah, here, well, you gotta do this now, and so, heck of an effort on your part for that.
Definitely a learning experience. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
I know how to start a
You can
program
run
from
it.
scratch. Probably never went on.
But you could.
I like public ed, I'll tell you that. PE was much more difficult.
It's just, I don't know, that's kind of where we stand on it. It's just,
What do you think, Mrs. Cameron? Because you haven't said too much.
Oh, I think all of us agree it would be great to be able to do it. But then when we look at, unfortunately, finances really does, interfere, I mean, not, well, it doesn't, but, it's what we can do for a small number of children. Although I do agree that small number of children at that age is where we should be, but.
Definitely. Well, what we have to do is licensure.
So when you look at how much money versus the number of children, it's, unless lots of people out there in Luna County give $1 million, several $1 million, I think we'd have to have a lot of more financial support. I think like everyone, we think it's a great opportunity, but when you look at running it and all that it entails, it's concerning on how we could, number one, how would we choose just the children? And then, how would we maintain that over the years instead of just once? I think it's a great program.
And the parents loved it. I got great feedback from all of them.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and if you had a nonprofit
Mhm.
come in, they could probably run this program
Exactly, yeah.
very well and do what needs to be done. Because again, adding 30% on top of your salary is, I mean, you look at that, that's basically your profit. I mean, if you run a corporation, right, your 30-40% markup on your
Yeah.
product, right? That's what you look for.
Mhm.
That's basically what would end up here if it was non-government running the program.
And when we have to suddenly get money from our school to take away from, the students that are in school too. And, I wish we could, I wish I had if I get $1 million, I'll give it to you and
Play the lottery.
who wants to go to Nevada with me? I'll drive and not charge. But I think you sit here and then how wonderful it would be, but yet, and how many children cannot participate because you have to only have such a small number. And,
That's the ratio. Yeah, the ratios are hard.
if we were in a rich area,
Yes.
That's not a good word. What are you supposed to use?
More fluid.
Yes, more.
More influent.
That was it. My last thing.
I was gonna
The
change it
questions,
over for you
that's
if
all.
you need.
The
to.
But
question.
I really think it's good though that we went through and.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thanks for putting it all together.
We appreciate your effort and everything you
Yes.
have done. You've kept this thing afloat this long, so that's commendable. We appreciate that. I mean, and again, I apologize that this might have to happen, but it is what it is.
Thank you, and like I said, it was a great learning opportunity for me.
Yeah,
But I promise y'all, when I get my next $5 million, I'll give them 1 million for it.
you're next, so that means you already have 5 million, huh? You said your next 5 million, so that means you already have 5 million, huh?
Do anything.
No, I said that. I said, when we have $5 million.
Oh, okay.
Did I leave some wording out of there? Yeah.
All right, we'll get back to presentations and we're on to the operational budget. SI 25-26.
Thank you.
I feel like you're yelling at me specifically.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We ran her out.
No more Saturdays.
So for the next piece, we'll be talking about our operational budget, which is the biggest piece of the funding sources for the new public schools. We do have federal grants, we do have capital improvement grants, things like that. But we're looking at the operational piece with this. I know all of you have seen this before. This is in Leslie's slides forever, kind of the process of what it takes to get a budget put together for the operational and in kind of those timelines. This year, a couple of things that's kind of pushed us a little bit further out is the 60-day session of the legislature. That always throws things out a little bit. And then changes within the district that's also kind of slowed things down a little bit. Just to kind of remind everybody of how we get funded. We get funded through the state equalization guarantee, or SEG. That was a funding formula that was done in the Public School Finance Act of 1974. They did do some updates to this last year in the legislative session. House Bill 63 did change some of those funding formulas, and the funding formula will go through that. Most of the income that we get comes from the income taxes, property taxes, all the taxes within the state, oil and gas, all of those types of things. So a few of the legislation things that happened, one, House Bill 63 that I just mentioned. What it did is it increased our factor for grades 6 through 12. For grade 6, we used to have a 1.045 factor. Now we're going to have a 1.3 factor. What that is that's added a multiplier to our unit value. We'll see how that projects later on in a couple of slides. It changed our at-risk on how that's calculated. It also changed our English language learners to be a standalone program rather than tied in with the at-risk. House Bill 2, that's the funding formula, or the funding for the state. It put in a 4% increase for all staff. The word average was line item vetoed out of the bill so that everybody gets a 4%. House Bill 156 increased the minimum salaries for teachers by $5,000. So this is the new minimums for each level. Deming Public Schools is over that level, or over that amount on all levels. And then House Bill 195 that changed the school nurse salaries. We'll do a 3-tier, more like the teacher pay salaries. So one of the things that we did is we put out a survey, a budget survey to the community to ask, what is your preferences? What are you looking for? And so this is the results of that survey. As you can see there, we had about 100 parents and about 90 staff, and then a few others in there. I think that's a good mix between community and employee. So the first question on there was, what is your priorities? And they come back with school safety and teacher salaries. I don't know that that's any surprise to anybody, of what they're looking for. Some of the things that Deming Public Schools right now is doing to address those, priorities is on safety. We're doing increased security. We're installing card reader access on all of the entrances. We've added security vestibules for schools. We do safety drills. We're adding, repairing, or improving fencing as needed throughout the district. We've got some security camera projects, here a couple of months ago, I believe, or maybe it was last month. It was last month, actually, you approved a bar, for $8 million to use some of our operational cash. And security cameras and security investment was one of those things, part of that $8 million. We are investigating scanning equipment. You've seen, sitting out here in the lobby, the